Now, I've played a lot of Pokemon throughout my life, and one goal I've always wanted to achieve is completing a living dex. Back in 2014, during a Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire cycle, I started work on this goal, but didn't get very far. Fast forward to last year, I continued picking up on this goal and completed the Kanto living dex on Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. And with all the Switch games and the DLC, almost every Pokemon is now available to get on the Switch. So I thought it's time to jump in again and work on the next easiest dex of the Sinnoh dex. Initially I played through all of BDSP to start working on the dex, until I realised it's actually impossible to get the mythicals anymore since they were all locked behind a mystery gift and those gifts are no longer active. So on to Legends Arceus instead. Now, Legends Arceus plays a lot differently than most of the other games in the main series since there aren't any gyms and the whole premise is to catch Pokemon, complete their dex entries and stop enraged noble Pokemon and solve the mystery behind the giant space wormhole in the sky. But this is not a story video and instead about catching the whole Sinnoh dex, so let's go on with that instead. The first area of the game is called the Obsidian Fieldlands, and there is a lot of Pokemon here. But we can't catch them all right away, as certain ones require certain story progression or high enough star in the Pokédex to actually catch them. So instead we'll just be speedrunning the way for the main story. If we catch Pokemon on the way, great, but if not, we'll come back to each area after we finish the main story or when we have a higher star level to catch them. But the first mission does require us to start catching Pokemon and work on the living dex with a Bidoof, a Starly and Shinx. Along the riverbank we catch a Bazil. Now, one thing Legends Arceus is actually known for is how easy it is to find shinies. A noise and a sparkle pops up when they appear, which I don't understand why they didn't include in Scarlet and Violet since it's also an open world game. It would make shiny hunting a lot nicer and easier, but still. The game is also open world, so we are encountering a lot more Pokemon as opposed to stuff in the grass in some of the previous generations. But just like that, we encounter our first shiny. But it unfortunately looks uncatchable. They're across the bridge in the Obsidian Fieldlands, which opens up the rest of the area, but to cross it we have to go into a cutscene. So if the cutscene respects all spawns in the area, then the shiny is lost. But if not, hopefully we are able to catch him. The moment of truth. The cutscene doesn't reset spawns, and our shiny is still there of Kricketot, who we successfully catch. They are indeed a member of the Sinnoh dex, but I would like a non-shiny one as well for the living dex, which we catch. Maybe one day we'll go for a shiny living dex, but that'll be in the far future. Right now we've got to finish the normal living dex. The next part of the story requires us to fight our first alpha Pokemon of an alpha Kricketune, and it turns out they can also be caught, which we managed to do with ease, adding another Pokemon to the dex. On our way to help deal with the first noble Pokemon, we catch a Staravia, Baneri, and one of our Shinx evolves into a Luxo. A Barbarrel is then caught along the riverbank, and once it hits night we pick up a Drifloon. Throughout every area there are shaking trees and rocks, indicating a Pokemon will jump out if you interact with it. One of these is a Burmy, who we successfully catch. However, it may not be the last one, as technically we need 3 of them in total, and the same goes for their female evolution. Since I am including different forms in the living dex, Burmy has a total of 3 different forms which we can catch in each area of the game, which means we do still need another 2. Hidden away in the far corner of the area, we also catch a Combee and a Mothrim. With the noble Pokemon now quelled, we are tasked to explore and investigate the new area of the Crimson Mirelands. As soon as we enter the area, the first thing we do is catch a Bidoof, probably pronouncing most of these wrong, so I'm just going to address it now, and a Carnivine. And while setting up the second base camp of the area, we also catch a Stunky. Hidden away in the grove of the Crimson Mireland, we catch our first Sinnoh starter of Turtwig. Falling out of a tree, we get a Sandy Cloak Burmy. And finally, hiding in the muddy marsh, we catch a Hippopotas. With the noble Pokemon now calmed down in the Crimson Mirelands, we make our way to the next area of the Cobalt Coastlands. Here we catch ourselves a Glamwell, a Scorpy, a Drifblim, and a Chatot. As we continue the story, Growlithe is captured by the Fortune Sisters, and we are now able to ride a Basculation to Fire Pit Island to rescue him. Along the way we catch a Shellos, who, much like Burmy, has another form, meaning we need a second one down the line. We also pick up a Phenone and a Trash Coat Burmy. To end off the area after dealing with the noble Pokemon, we catch our second starter of Sinnoh, Prinplup. With yet another noble Pokemon quelled, we are tasked to explore another new area of the Coronet Highlands. Here we catch ourselves a Luxray, Bronzor, and a Gible. Now, before we are able to take on the next noble Pokemon, something actually pops up to distract us. A space-time distortion. They have a chance to spawn in every area after a certain amount of time has passed, with a guaranteed spawn at 40 minutes, as long as it's not raining or snowing. The appeal of them is that certain Pokemon can only spawn with one, and there's a high chance to find some fully evolved Pokemon. There's also some evolutionary items which you would find otherwise through the merit point system, but I'm not going to get into that now. Now with the Coronet Highlands, the exclusives that we are looking for are the 2 fossil Pokemon, and we get very lucky with a Sheldon and 2 Craniodoses spawning, who we catch, meaning that we only need one more Sheldon or Bastrodon, and the worst case scenario we can dig one up in BDSP. We then calm down the noble Pokemon with ease and prepare to make our way to the final area. However, we do need to gain another star in our Pokédex to accept the mission, so back to the Obsidian Fieldlands it is to fill up some more Dex entries. Here we catch a Staraptor, Togekiss, Munchlax, a West Sea Shellos, and a West Sea Gastrodon, the final starter of Chimchar, a Plant Cloak Wormadam, Mime Jr., Floatzel, Happiny, and a Lopunny. We also evolve an Apon into an Ambipom, and during this whole ordeal a space-time distortion spawns, where inside we catch a Licky Licky and a Sneasel, who is immediately evolved into a Weavile. And one of our Chimchars also evolves in the process into a Monfernape. With all the new catches and evolutions, we have gained enough points to be promoted to the next star level and are able to take on the mission that brings us to the new area of the Alabaster Icelands. In the Alabaster Icelands, compared to the last few areas, we don't actually make much progress on the living dex, since I know we are nearing the end of the main story and I just want to power through as quick as possible. However, that's not to say we didn't make any progress at all. We evolve an Eevee into a Glaceon at the icy rock inside a cave. A space-time distortion ends up forming where we catch an Electivire and a Tanglegrowth, and as we make our way to the temple we catch a Chingling and a Trash Cloak Wormadam. With these last 2 catches we make our way to the noble Pokemon, who we calm down and enter the final act of the main story. During this whole act I don't actually catch any new Pokemon for the living dex until right at the end, and just run through as quick as possible to get to the endgame. Here we catch both the legendary Pokemon of Palkia and Dialga, and upon doing so we complete the main story. With the main story now finished, it is time to revisit all the areas to obtain our missing Pokemon and complete the post-game, since a certain Pokemon is locked behind it. I'm sure you can probably work out who. We start off by tracking back to the Obsidian Fieldlands, where we catch the first member of the Lake Trio, Mesprit. Alongside Mesprit, Infernape, the mythical Shaman, and Cherubi, I don't know, pronounce that wrong, are also caught in the Fieldlands, and we evolve an Eevee into a Leafeon at the Mossy Rock. Back to the Crimson Mirelands. The first thing we do upon arrival is go and catch the second member of the Lake Trio, Azelf. With Azelf caught, we adventure around the Mirelands to catch all those who remain. Hippowdon, Crowunk, Pachirisu, Toxicroak, Grotle, Yanmega, Bonsly, Stuntank, and Vespiquen are all added to the living dex, and we evolve a Roselia into a Roserade. Next, we return to the Cobalt Coastlands, and straight away we catch some more Pokemon for the living dex. Parugly, Prinplup, Dusknoir, Drapion, Mantike, Haunchcrow, Heatran, East Sea Gastrodon, Manaphy and Phony are all added to the collection, along with a couple of evolutions of Empoleon, Rampardos, Cherim and Luminion. The next area we return to is the Alabaster Icelands. Here we catch the final member of the Lakes trio of Uxie. A Bronzong, Regigigas and Gallade are all caught inside Snowpoint Temple. And around the rest of the area we finish off with a Mamoswine, Snover, Abomasnow, Frostlass, Garchomp, Lucario and Railu. With the Alabaster Icelands now ticked off, we return once more to the Coronet Highlands, where we catch Rotom, Mismagius, Probopass, Gliscor, Gabite, Magnezone, Sandycloak Wormadam, Cresselia, Darkrai, Rhyperior, and the evolutions of Bastiodon, Magmortar, and Polygon Z, leaving just 3 Pokemon left to collect for the Sinnoh decks. The first is Giratina, locked behind completing the post-game story, which we have been progressing through while collecting our missing Pokemon. After arguably one of the most difficult battles in the Pokemon series, defeating Volo and the Giratina that he spawned, which then retreats back to Turnback Cave, we are able to battle Giratina once more, capturing them and adding them to the living decks. The next Pokemon up is Spiritomb. Scattered across every area of the game, there is a total of 107 Wisps we have to collect. Upon collecting the 107th, we can return to Vesa in Real Life Village, where she then instructs us to meet us at night at the old Keystone in the Crimson Mirelands. Upon interacting with the old Keystone, Vesa disappears and the final Wisp appears in front of the old Keystone. Collecting it and then interacting once more, a Spiritomb spawns, who we then proceed to capture. Before we go on to the final Pokemon, there are just a few more things we have to clean up. The first is the Rotom forms. There are a total of 5 different form variants, which are obtained via taking a Rotom and interacting with the different appliances which it can turn into. Through both the use of Legends Arceus and BDSP, since I don't have all the appliances in one save just yet, we obtain the 5 different forms of Rotom. For Sinnoh Pokemon, we also have Shaymin. Since you can only catch 1 per save game and it is locked to the post game, rather than playing through the game once more just for 1 Pokemon, I ended up taking the one from my original playthrough after turning it into Skyform Shaymin. The second set of forms we have to obtain is the Hisuian forms. Although there are quite a few Pokemon to obtain in different generations, I decided to only include the ones for the living dexes I have completed or am actively working on, and for a future video I'll come back for the other forms. Since there's not any Sinnoh Hisuian forms, that just leaves the Cantonian ones. Growlithe, Arcanine, Voltorb, and Electrode are all caught and added to the decks. Now I suppose there's technically another set of Pokemon for the Sinnoh living decks. Since Hisui is just Sinnoh in the past, and there are only 7 new Pokemon actually added in Legends Arceus, rather than creating their own 3-minute video, I thought I might as well just include them into this. Throughout the game I've ended up collecting them at different points. The order that they were collected goes the following: Ursaluna, Kleavor, Sneasler, Overquill, Muscalegion, who has a different form for both male and female, Weirdeer, and Anomorous, who has a Firion form which, just like Shaymin, can only be catched once per save, so I take the one from my original playthrough. And with that, that is the Hisuian living dex done. Now for the final Pokemon, Arceus, or Arceus. I guess it's an ARC phone, so I guess Arceus. I'm still going to say Arceus though, because that's how I've always said it. Anyway, after obtaining every Pokemon in the Hisuian Pokédex and returning to Mount Coronet and playing the Azura Flute, a set of stairs appears in front of us. Climbing up, we are challenged by Arceus. Not in a Pokemon battle, but in the same style how we have previously quelled the noble Pokemon and Dialga. Upon defeating Arceus in this challenge, we are gifted a fragment of true form Arceus, which is just a part of them which we can use as a Pokemon. Obtaining Arceus then completes the Sinnoh Living Dex. And that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you did, a like, comment and subscription would be a great way to show it. If you want to watch the previous Living Dex video of the Kanto one, a link to that will be on screen now and a link in the description as well. I have now started working on the next set of the Living Dex, so hopefully it will be out somewhat soon, so keep an eye out for that. But with that, that is the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.